today's creative space, I have Carol Mitchell, who is my publisher, and I would dare say an associate and friend, who we have to say congratulations to because she has published her novel. But I want to start with this. Carol, I don't know about you, but for me, it's been a morning. So, so I'm already in a space of what's that about a morning? Mm. I'm hoping that the proverb doesn't hold true because I want the day to be much better than the morning. But Carol's book is entitled What's That About a Morning? And we know as Caribbean people, finish it for them, Carol.
And good evening time.
Yeah. How it started is how it's going to finish. We Caribbean people are very fatalistic, aren't we? If you think about it. Like, what is that proverb? Like, open up your day, have some hope.
For the right, I can turn this around, right?
But I read the book a year ago. I was fortunate enough to be one of the early readers. It's a great book, and it's been getting lots of positive buzz. And I'm anticipating lots of awards conversation as well, knock on wood and all that. But Carol, how has the journey been for you this past year?
Well, it's been first of all, thanks for having me on, Joanne. And I also do consider you a friend, and it's a really pleasure. We haven't spoken in a long time, so it's great to see you and to talk with you this
Okay.
morning. So the journey has been really interesting. As you know, as you mentioned, I'm a publisher as well. And so this book was published by Central Avenue Publishing, which is an independent publisher out of Canada. And so this has been my first experience, well, my second experience, because I have some books with HarperCollins. But
Mm.
my first experience was an adult book on the other side of the table, and it's been, they've been very supportive, and I have really been out there just greasing the wheels in a way that I haven't done with a lot of my other books, to be quite honest. And so it has been quite a journey, quite an experience. I've gotten so much support, which has been amazing. I've been talking about the book all over Virginia. I've been to different parts of the US to do readings and things like that. And I have been down to St. Kitts, and I'm hoping to come down to Antigua and Trinidad and a few other Caribbean countries. But I have been, really overwhelmed and excited and happy by the response that the book has gotten, and by the just the feedback that I've received from readers who've been excited about it and kind of really connected with the characters.
Okay, let's talk about connecting with the characters and all of that. Because it's a book about a woman, an immigrant woman in the US who is struggling with the ghost of her past. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And who is, it's almost like she has locked certain things behind the paywall in her mind, that she has to pay a price in her current time to unlock so that she can become fully merged with herself. Is that a fair
I
summary?
love the way you put that. Yes, that is.
So
Summary.
tell me about how you landed on that story and those characters.
Yeah, so I think I can say, like you, a very character driven writer. And so the characters come to me first. I was in a workshop and I started writing about this young man who kills his parents and then turns himself into the police. And that does not happen in the book. But that was kind of the manifestation of one of the characters, Taiwo, who is the main character's son. And I've always, I write about male characters as well as female characters. In my children's book, the one of the main protagonists is a young boy. But I really, and when I'm writing for adults, I'm thinking very differently from when I write for children, and I'm thinking about certain issues and that people go through. And I found myself much more interested in the mother of this young man. And so I started writing stories about her, and that's kind of how it built up. And she having this son, it began with her having this son who was in a very difficult place. It doesn't turn out like this in the book, but it started to focus on her family and her upbringing, and how all of that played into who she was as a mother and who she was as a wife. And this whole idea of what start bad a morning in Amaya's life is about, Amaya is the name of the main character. If you're looking at her from the outside, you're like, oh yeah, she's got all of the balls up in the air and she's keeping them up there. She's tapping each one and they're all doing fine. But in reality, for herself, she has all these feelings of guilt, these feelings of wishing that she could do something more, be something for herself, and she can't. And one of the reasons is that she's kind of buried her past, and she hasn't really um been able to move forward from that. And it's interesting that you talked about the fatalism of Caribbean people, because one of the things I was thinking about as I was writing this is this whole idea of how we deal with trauma. And it's sort of this way where, like,
Well,
this
spoiler alert, we don't. That's what we deal with
we
trauma. We
do
don't.
not, right? We
How do we
really, really,
let me tell
really
you,
do that.
let me tell you, we went through as a calypso hundreds of years of slave. How do we move on from slavery if we're not able to compartmentalize a little bit and imagine ourselves as fully human beings? So I don't judge us for it, but we have to find a better way.
We
And
have to
one
do
of the
that.
things your book delves into is mental health and our need to find a better way.
Right. Yeah. So that's something I think about a lot. You talk about slavery. I think about hurricanes, for example. We
Oh,
experience all these natural disasters, and then we get up and we start rebuilding. And you're not expected to be like, oh my gosh, this has been so horrible. And I understand, it's important, things could always be worse. They could always, always. There's very few situations in which they can't be worse, but you have to give yourself some time to grieve. You've lost things,
I
you know.
always say that my grandmother, who is like the archangel in our family, died when I was little, so we kind of keep her in this special place in our hearts. But one of her sayings, now I think about it, was "leave room for disappointment." That was one of her sayings that has defined how we approach life. And it's like, damn, leave room for
Yeah.
hope, leave room for no,
Right,
but that
exactly.
is emblematic of how we think.
How we think,
And to
yeah.
be quite honest, we have been traumatized. We have
Yeah,
been traumatized. I
for
mean,
sure.
if you come forward from slavery, as you say, every year we're still dealing with an expanding hurricane season. The politics, the poverty, the whole thing. We just kind of power through it, and
Right.
we don't embrace that whole quote unquote soft life mantra, and it's not healthy. And I found it interesting that one of the ways you grappled with it was you just kind of had her check out at times. Um,
Right.
what I would call losing time, which would almost be like those stories of people having alternate personalities, but she didn't have alternate personalities. Sometimes
No.
her brain or her soul just said, "I need a break. I'm going somewhere else." And in those times, the somewhere else sometimes
It
was
was,
trying to knock
right.
on the door of the trauma. Um,
Right. Yeah.
is any of this reflective of any part of your journey, or is it completely, as you said, that story of the boy?
Yeah, this is completely fiction. I mean, people ask me that all the time, and the reality is that you will always leave a piece of yourself in your writing. And as I talk about it sometimes, for example, Amaya comes to the US. She has a young son when she comes. And that was actually my journey into the US. When I arrived, my son was 1 year old. But I came under very different situation, very different circumstances. So there are like bits and pieces of my immigrant experience in there. But Amaya was 19. I was a grown woman when I came. But it is really very much fiction. I haven't had, and that's one of the things, like my agent, when we first met, he asked me, is any of this your story? um I have had a lot of interaction. So Amaya's son Taiwo is autistic, and I have had a lot of interactions and just really in-depth dealings with young people with autism. So not that I'm any expert, but I have very close kids that I consider very close to me who are dealing or who experience autism. It's not a disease or anything like that. But no, apart from that, it is really very much fiction. And the traumatic event that Amaya is it ultimately has ultimately buried. Obviously, if you know me, it's not I haven't experienced anything close to that. However, I did want to bring in this whole idea of the impact that politics and the decisions that our leaders make can have on our lives. And that's kind of very much what happens. I mean, it's not that it's not a political event, but the build up to what happens to
The
Amaya
politics are part of it, yeah. The
is very
politics
much,
are matched.
yeah.
Politics are matched. And you are originally from Nevis, yes?
Yes, I'm saying
So
my listeners think it's Nevis is what she means.
the book doesn't go anywhere near Nevis.
It
It's
does not.
Jamaica, it's the Trinidadian mother-in-law, it's America. It's like no Nevis here.
No
No,
Nevis at all. Yeah.
so it's
And
like, no, this is not my story. Get away from me with
right,
that. We write fiction. Um,
right.
I love the relationships. As you were talking about the son, the relationship between her and her son is such an important one. But I also think of her relationships with her friends and even the fractured ones with her mother-in-law and her aunt and her husband. They're all complicated and interesting and in their own ways. Not even the ones with her son. It's not easy, but it's real. And I thought that was well grasped as from a
Thank you.
craft standpoint. I really tell me about the writing of those relationships, where you had to go to get those.
That's a great question. Well, as I mentioned before, I have children and I do write a lot about motherhood. It's not easy. And as much as you love your children, it's it's a complicated experience. And I write about that a lot. And I've over time, now I have some distance because my children are grown. I've been able to look back on that with I think with clear eyes. And I think that helps me to write about a relationship where you can love someone and still realize at some point that you have to separate and you have to be yourself as well. And then that's good for them as well as it is good for you. Um, in terms of the other relationships, I think that they sort of more came out of knowing Amaya really well. I spent a lot of time I write a lot of outtakes, is what I call them when I'm writing. So I got to know her very well. I wrote a lot about other aspects of her life, other events and things that did not end up at all in the book. And I think knowing that character really well helps you to write to understand how they interact with other people and to have that feel very real.
I wanted to touch on something that you just said. You're a publisher, Caribbean Reads Publishing. I'm an editor in addition to being a writer. We're both writers. I think we've both come across manuscripts where you realize that people, maybe new writers or maybe writers with a little less patience, think that you write the first line, you write through to the last line, story done, send it out. It doesn't quite work like that. I mean, unless you're savant, it can work like that. But it's very, 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 very rare. The story needs work. And one of the things that you said, that work can be play, right? Because you said you have all these outtakes. That's these scenes, these moments, these interactions with the characters that don't necessarily end up in the final draft. Why is that important?
As at Caribbean Reads, we get lots of manuscripts coming in. We read every single one, and I typically would give a little feedback to people when I respond. And a lot of times we get very, very first drafts, and this is not what you should be sending out to publishers. I always suggest to people that, first of all, that you sit on the work for a little bit, right? It might be a week, it might be 3 weeks, it might be months, it might be a year, and then come back to it. But it takes time. You got to put it down and come back to it with fresh eyes. And then the other thing is to getting to know your character. Really, I spoke to someone about this just a couple of days ago, and I was working with a piece they asked me to review for them, and I said, like, I really don't feel you know this guy. You're writing about this guy and you're saying that the readers, that people have read it, they don't understand his motivation. I said, it's because you don't understand his motivation. You need to step aside from it. You need to write, it's a short story, so write more about this character so you really fully understand how did he get to that point that where they are in the story today. How did he end up there? And even write about what happens afterwards. And none of this might end up in a short story in literal terms, but it will feed in, and your reader will will understand your story and relate to your story better because you know the character better. And so, as I said, a lot of time what we get are first drafts, and you really do need to take some time, reread, reorganize, revise, think about, is this the right place to start the story? And it's hard to look at your own writing objectively. It really is. And that's why it's so important to, hire editors and to listen to the feedback. I mean, you don't have to accept everything that somebody tells you about your writing, but you should at least consider it, that as a reader, this is how they're responding to it, and there's a reason for that, and you need to deal with it however you deal with it. This is something that I think we struggle with in the Caribbean, because, and maybe not just in the Caribbean, but I think we write, and as you said, you get to that last line and you're like, I'm done, and then somebody comes in, they give you feedback that you don't really like or you're not ready for, and it's difficult to accept, but you have to be tough. You've got to listen, if you really want to get anywhere with in this writing world.
When there are opportunities to submit, we don't submit at a high volume. Is that part of that fear of not hearing that your work is perfect? What is that?
I think that there's a big gender gap in the reason that it happens, and I don't think it's just in the Caribbean. I do think that women tend to be more hesitant to, we're like, okay, this isn't right, nobody's gonna like it, whereas men, just on average, obviously I'm generalizing here, tend to be
I'm good
more.
to go, right?
I beg your pardon?
I'm saying the men, they're like, yeah, it's ready, right? It's good.
Yeah, it's ready. Yeah. So set it up. You didn't like it? Look at it again. And they're more likely to do that thing where, and this is something I've learned, where somebody turns you down, and then instead of just kind of going and weeping in a corner, you go back and you say, okay, well, what can I do to change your mind? And sometimes just hearing that will help. Somebody will pull up and will give you if you ask, will give you the support and the advice that you need. I find a lot of times when I get submissions and I give people feedback, I either get very defensive responses, or just nothing. And a lot of times I leave it open for additional feedback.
What has been the major surprise of being on one side of writing and publishing to being on the other side of writing and publishing? You've always been a writer and a publisher, but now you have to surrender a certain amount of control. Let's put it that way. I don't think you're surrendering control, but you have to, you have somebody who is investing in you, as opposed to betting on yourself as you've done throughout your writing career.
I think that idea of surrendering control has been difficult for me. If you know anything about me, I'm a control freak. And there's an audio version of this book, and the audio rights were bought by another company, and I had the pleasure of auditioning people who were going to read, and like the first writer refusal, and I did end up finding someone that I thought I've heard has done a good job. But one of the things I haven't done is I haven't read the book except for the sections I read for for places since it came out, like since I handed it over and the editor and I agreed this is the last version.
It's very unusual to go back and read it.
I haven't opened it. Well, I've done that for my other books because I have the control because I'm in a position where I can say, okay, I'm going to change this. I'm going to fix this. I have that for some of my other books, but for this one, I can't. And for the audio, I haven't listened to it, because I can't, and I haven't read the reviews. I've just taken this I've stepped away from it, and in a way, because my writing has changed a lot. I started writing this book in 2018, and so I've moved on in a very real way from it. But I think that has been the biggest thing, is my ability to step away from it, to let it go, let the publisher make the decisions they need to make, and just think that I have done the best that I can with this, and it's out in the world now, and I'm just I'm releasing it. So that I think for me has been the biggest thing. It's been a learning experience for me to be able to give up that control and to let it go. So I guess in terms of a surprise, I'm surprised I was able to do that because
I do think that one of the ways that publishing has kind of collapsed on itself a little bit is that I don't know if you have that idea that this fantasy that writing is this thing where I don't know your publisher is going to book you like this Meryl Streep movie I saw where the she had to go to England for a thing. I guess she might have been a best-selling author, so maybe that's why she gets a different level of treatment. But she's not. She doesn't fly, so they booked her on the I think it's the QE2 to sail slowly across towards London or wherever with two of her friends in the best suites and so on. I'm like,
Yeah, that does not happen.
I don't know how Sarah Jessica Parker afforded that apartment writing one column like, in New York, which is an expensive
Exactly.
city. So I'm just saying it's the writing life is not all as glamorous as it is chalked up to be, but it is an exciting adventure. And I think why I went on this tangent a little bit is one of the things that for me has been almost the reverse of what you just said. Because when I first got when I got my first publishing deal, I think I thought, okay, they'll take care of it,
Mm.
surrender, and they didn't. And when I got the opportunity again, I said, no, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to hustle as hard as I can for my books because
Right.
I am their biggest advocate. That's not to say that I don't want them or don't count on them to do what they say they're going to do for the book, but I'm not just going to put it down and walk away. I'm going to be a little bit annoying. I think you'll say I'm a little bit annoying.
Not at all. I don't I have never I work with a lot of authors. You're definitely not on the the very annoying ones.
But I've worked with several publishers, and you've been one of the best in my experience. I'm not just blowing, I've said this to other people. Um, I don't have to light a candle and wonder what's going on in terms of everything hasn't been perfect. Everything hasn't worked out the way I wanted it to. And I think you would say the same. But
For sure.
it's never been because I felt like you weren't doing everything you could try to make this happen and to make the authors, hey, you do have a pool of authors at this point and illustrators feel that like they have value to you and to the company and so on. So tell me about how you navigate um, your publishing style, your ethos of your company, your how you approach your relationships with your authors.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm gonna give you a really long answer because as you said, yeah, I've been on this other side of it. And I always say to my authors that yes, we publish a book. We want to have the best book. We want to have the book that you are going to be proud to show. So from the get-go, I try to have the authors really very much involved in the whole process because if you're not happy with the book, then you're just going to put it under your shelf and you're not going to go out there and talk to people about it. And that is really how books sell. You know, as you said, this myth on TV shows that you just sit and write in a corner and you send the book out and then it somehow just magically is taken up all over the world. That does not happen. And I don't even think I mean, even best-selling authors, I think, have to push, and maybe they get more opportunities because of their name, but they still have to go out there and make themselves available. They've got to hustle. And the other thing is that I don't think that people realize is that I've been doing a lot of readings and appearances and things like that, and it's selling books, but sometimes there's just one person there or three people there, but those are the ones where you only see me in the photos, right? And so, but it's a big hustle. And so what we try to do at Caribbean Reads is to support the authors in that. So, make sure that it's a product that they're really excited about and they want to promote. And then B,
That's not a small point. Sometimes before the book comes out, the author is already disheartened by just how the book looks and all of that. They don't feel enthusiastic to support it. That's important.
right. And then they're not out there. They don't like you have the poster of musical youth behind you there. They're not doing that, right? Because they're not excited about the cover. And then on the other side of it, then, we try to support them as they're going to different events, so you might come to me and say, I'm doing this event. Can you send the books down or can you put out this press release? We try to give to support also with materials and that sort of thing, but we're a very small publisher, so we can't And we've done it, I think that we've done it for you, bring people to places, but we will reach out and make the contacts and help you to get there and help you, write recommendations, do all that sort of support as much as we can. But the author really, really, really has to be the champion of the book. It's your book. And
Even whether you're self-published, independent with a small press, or with a big
big
house,
publisher,
you
you got to
still
do
have,
it. And
yeah,
yeah, and people think that, oh, if I'm with a big house, I'm gonna get, no, that's not how it works. You still got to be out there hitting the pavement, and that then generates more, so the next time, and this is how it works, like the next book that you have out, people are going to look at
yeah,
what did you do, how did you promote this book in as part of their decision making, because they're not just buying the book, they're buying the author as well.
yeah. I'll
So
rephrase that. Nobody's buying me, but yeah. You
well,
get
okay. They're
yeah, but
investing
I
in,
get the
how
point. I
about
get
they're
the
not
point.
just investing in the book, they're investing in the author as well.
I want to close off with a tip for because in the Caribbean we've had to do it different. That's just how it is. We don't exist in the big marketplaces, so we've had to carve our own ways. And when I look back, I'm actually surprised. They've been dead ends, but I'm surprised at the paths that sometimes you've been able to cut without realizing that you're cutting a path that other people can now walk behind and do their thing. And you have to network with each other within our very small Caribbean publishing space. What's a tip you would give for creatives, writers who are thinking, I want to be a success at this. I want to tell a story. I want to put it out in the world, and I want people to get it.
You got to write, and you have to read. So just to make sure that what you're getting out there is a really high quality product, because that's the most important thing. There's nothing, I mean, that's actually not true. There are a lot of books out there that aren't particularly good, but anyway, we're not going to step there. Let's assume that that's not what we're heading for. So you want to make sure that you have the best quality possible out there. And then I think what you said, that creating those networks is really important. And I feel that in the Caribbean, we're getting there to some extent, but we still have a long road to go in terms of being a community where creatives feel supported, where we can learn from each other's experiences and don't have to keep recreating the wheel for each one of us individually. I don't think that should be happening at this day, especially as a lot of Caribbean books are being accepted into mainstream so much more now. But get out there, read a lot, see what other people are doing, talk to people, let people know what it is that you want. That's something that I've learned as in my old age here, that you have to tell people that I want this book to come out, I want it to be a bestseller, I want to be on whatever is your goal. And in addition to working towards it, you've got to let people know that what you're trying to do, and hopefully they will also step in at some point if they have the resources, if they have the connections to help you out with that. But the main thing I think is just getting that product that is really solid, and then submit, in addition to letting people know what you want to do, talking about it, send your work out, be brave, send your work out to um to competitions, to publishers, and listen when you get feedback. As I say, you don't have to take it, but you should at least take it into consideration, figure out why people are responding to the work this way, and then address it in the way that makes most sense to you. And also understand that not everybody's gonna get what you're writing.
Yeah,
I write some weird stuff now.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
everybody, I'm so sorry. Not everybody's gonna get what you're writing, but you've got to still think about the audience. It is a very, if you don't want to be just writing for yourself, and you have to think about what other people are gonna say as well. So I think
You
those
know,
are the tips that I would put forward.
Carol, as we wrap up, there's something that you just said that is, I think, a struggle, certainly for me, and I think not unusual. Our generation of Caribbean people, I don't think as much the younger people, is putting your stuff out there before you do it, telling people what you're going for, what you want, that kind of thing. We kind of been conditioned to don't let people see your hand, don't let people. I forget the proverb for it, but it's almost like a distrust of putting it out. And I'm learning. As you know, I blog and all that, my writing journey. I'm learning it's okay to put that stuff out there because you never know what doors it could open.
It
And
open.
let it sit in that discomfort. I'm happy to say, however, that what start by the morning is going okay. In terms of the proverb and where we started, we're going okay because I enjoyed this conversation and I'm hoping that's a beautiful cover, by the way. I'm hoping that anyone who's watching this is learning a thing or two from someone who knows both sides of the business, the small presses and now the big presses, and locally, regionally, internationally. Carol Mitchell, she is a trailblazer. Big up to you, and thanks for taking the time to talk with me today.